Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of ReImagine Liberty, the podcast. I am your host, Kyra Lee, hailing from Long Beach, California. And this week we have an extremely special edition. I am honored and extremely excited to bring three amazing Black men to the mic this week to discuss Black men in this movement that are making change at the local level. I would love to bring our three special guests onto camera view, starting with Brandon, Coach P. Parrish, Ferin Kid, that is hailing from The Road in St. Louis, and finally Nguvu, hailing from Detroit, Michigan. Welcome, gentlemen. How's everybody doing?
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
I am so excited to get this conversation going. A lot of folks have been interacting with this movement from different places at the local level. So I wanted to give some conversation to our Black men to kind of discuss how you all got involved in creating change, avenues that have worked for you all, and the different things that you all are pushing forward in your local communities. So let's start with you, Nguvu. First and foremost, welcome so much to today's chat.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here. We've been trying to make this happen for a minute, so I'm happy we finally got it together.
Absolutely. Nguvu was one of my favorite people, always on the move. We connected while he was in Chicago, back in the city of Detroit now. So I definitely wanted to make this conversation happen as a Detroit girl myself, for sure. Yeah. So you were recently assigned a new position representing a incumbent that we are trying to get elected currently. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so everybody, it's so nice to be here. My name is Nguvu J. Tsare, born and raised in Lansing, Michigan, and then moved to Detroit about 14 years ago when I was 18. My entire life has been about radical pro-Black activism. I joined the Black nationalist and Pan-African movement when I was 15. My first organization was with the New Black Panther Party. Then I moved to Detroit after high school, got involved with Empowerment Detroit, where we did HIV prevention work for young gay Black men. Before that, I had founded the Black Student Union at my high school. I've lived all over Chicago, Minneapolis, DC, Atlanta, done activist work with different organizations, the National Black United Front, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Republican New Africa. Most recently moved back home to Detroit in 2015 and got involved with New Era Detroit. Ran for city council in 2017. Lost, but made a good showing and had a good rapport with the residents of my district, and everything's just been taken off since then. Joined a progressive leadership development organization called New Leaders Council Detroit, and I'm now the director of that organization. And like you were alluding to, Kyra, most recently I was just hired. Well, last year I worked as an organizer for the Biden campaign, and this year I just got hired as the campaign manager for Councilwoman Janae Ayers, who is one of the most dynamic, down-to-earth women I've ever met. I feel so lucky that she thought of me to manage her campaign. Going from an organizer to a manager is kind of like going from being a cashier at McDonald's to owning the franchise. So, for me to, have this opportunity, I'm just incredibly blessed, and I'm excited to roll up my sleeves and get her reelected.
I absolutely love it. So the first question that I'd like to ask is, tell me a bit about your background. Where are your parents from? Because on this podcast, we explore types of Blackness, where different types of Black folk are coming from. So tell me a bit about your ethnic background, first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm African all day, period. But my mother is an African-American woman. My father is Afro-Puerto Rican. I never knew my father. I was raised by a single Black woman. I'm the oldest of 5. And, I was very blessed to have a mother who bust her ass. Can we curse on this podcast?
Totally adult content. Do your thing.
She bust her ass to take care of us. And she did a really, really good job. And she's still doing a good job. So I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, which is probably about 55-60% white. And my mother had the means to send us to the suburban school district for a better education. And the downside to getting that better education is that we had to deal with a lot of racism, a lot of prejudice. But my mother made it very clear that we were in that district for one reason and one reason only, and that was to take advantage of those resources and then pour those resources back into our community. And so that's kind of my background. I grew up with a mother who was never really conscious, but she had common sense. You know what I'm saying? And it's because of her that I'm doing the work that I do today.
I love it. Hell of an introduction. Thank you so much. And you're in very good company this morning.
I can tell.
Yes, indeed. I want to pivot to Brandon Parrish, affectionately known as Coach P. Could you tell us a bit about your background and your current role in the city of Detroit, as you and Nguvu are definitely doing work in the same streets for sure?
Oh, well, I definitely don't have the resume as the gentleman before me. I will say that most definitely. But as far as my background is concerned, my parents, I come from middle class background. They grew up in South Side Chicago, moved to Detroit back in 1990, and I was from 7 Mile, Illinois, and I've just been around my people pretty much my whole life. Like gentlemen before me, out in South Side Chicago to Detroit, DC. I lived in South Central Los Angeles, like that. That's where I've always been, and anywhere that I basically live, like we talked about before privately, I just want to make it better. It's really that simple. It's like you don't want to walk out your front door and just see things that you don't like. And so no matter what community I've ever lived in, whether it's been Southside Chicago, here in Detroit, or the projects in DC, we want to get outside and make this place better, make our neighborhood better and stuff like that. That's basically the kind of not necessarily role I have for the city. As far as for the city is my job, I work in the Parks and Rec department, and I've basically got that opportunity because I was coaching for 11 years for UD Jesuit, and the relationships that I made there got me positioned in the Parks and Rec department. And again, it just gives us the opportunity to be out in the community, because there's nothing, I don't feel comfortable working in front of a computer all day. I can't live like that. I have to be out. I got to be talking to people. I got to be helping people if I can. This early day, I'm on my way to this park up here, and I see an accident. You got to pull over and stop. You just got to be out here, do what you can to help people. And that's just part of what keeps me going every day and what I'm always trying to do.
Absolutely love it. So Coach P is probably best known for your role in the coaching staff of U of D Jesuit, which is a prominent high school in Detroit. You all went all the way to the state championship, right? Big game at Michigan State. And have definitely built relationships with a lot of young men coming through that program, through that role, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And what gives me most pride about that program and the gentlemen that have come through it is that we all have the same type of mentality, where I've got Jordan Morgan. He graduated in 2009, I believe, played for University of Michigan. They went to the Final Four. He's got his own Jordan Morgan Foundation where he's out in the community trying to do things. Cash Winston, ever since he was a seventh grader, you just saw the impact that he wants to make on other people. You'll see him out there when he started getting famous. Not famous, but famous around here in the basketball circles. He'd be like a junior and senior high school. He'd go down to the academy, seventh grade, just sit there and sign autographs for them, because everybody thinks, he's going to be a superstar. And even though he didn't become a superstar yet, he's just got to the league. He's got the ability, and, who knows what got, but I bring that up to say we all are kind of raised with a service mentality. That's part of the Jesuit way. That's what you learn when you go to the Jesuit. You want to serve others. And that's part of our, slogan, men for others. We're here to serve like Jesus did. And so when you get that mentality as a youth, you get out here and you want to just help people in any way you can. And that's just part of, coming through U of D, coaching from U of D. That's the mentality we all get.
Absolutely love it. And thank you all for having that mentality. We'll circle into some of the specifics in just a minute, because you have quite a bit in common with our next guest, Ferin Kidd of OC, founder of the Blvck OC, which is a nonprofit organization here in Southern California that definitely has made an impact on the youth definitely made an impact on the Black family here. And Ferin has been extremely active in connecting across racial divide, across ethnic background, across socioeconomic economic statuses to bring folks together. So Ferin, if you could come off of mute and tell a bit about your mission here in California that's growing outside of the state of California as we speak.
Yeah, so just real quick, because I'm in the vehicle and I want to make sure that you guys can hear me all right. I'm coming through pretty clear?
Coming through crystal clear.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so my name is Ferin Kidd, and I say I'm chief representative for Black OC. I'm a representative for my community. I'm just one member among many members. I'm doing work to redefine, the Black narrative. But yes, I'm currently in Minneapolis, not St. Paul, Minneapolis, the epicenter of the focal point where George Floyd was murdered last year. We're out here not only to join the community in commemorating George Floyd, but also to bring back a film that I shot here last year, immediately following the murder of George Floyd. But in any case, what was the particular question that you wanted to ask me?
A bit about the work that Black OC does here in Southern California and why it's important to you, how you're showing up for your community, and what ways you like to use to help.
So probably the best way to describe what Black OC does is through a mission statement. So we say we're a creative movement utilizing the power of hip hop to build community, establish greater equality among all demographics while promoting a higher standard for urban culture. We think that arts and creativity is imperative to helping redefine Blackness and change the narrative of Blackness. For myself, my camera is my weapon. I grew up like young brothers coming out of Southern California, getting caught up in the gang culture, the criminal culture, spent a significant portion of time in and out of juvenile institutions, as well as adult institutions, culminating in a 10-year prison sentence for possession of firearm and armed robbery. Almost, had to spend the rest of my life in there at 20 years old. But building with the brothers, was able to, self-rehabilitate, to connect back to a truer version of Blackness, and coming back. It's been about almost 5 years now that I've been home. I utilize my camera to highlight and amplify the voices and the people in our community, in our culture, who are doing the same work that we're all doing here today, which is positive change and community development inside the Black community. Also, we place a strong emphasis on unification and solidarity with other people. Orange County is not a predominantly Black environment. It's a predominantly brown and white environment. And so growing up Black in Orange County can be a particularly unique experience by virtue of the fact that, you're kind of isolated. You're alone in your Blackness in many respects, as for many of us. Yet and still, you're going to be subject to many of the same, confusing narratives about Blackness. You're going to be subject to, a lot of the discrimination that comes with being in communities that are not your own. So I connect and I build with people across all races and all cultural backgrounds, because we understand how imperative it is in our communities to be successful in developing those relationships and championing solidarity and unity with other people as well.
I love it. One of the first questions that I would like to ask this group is, where do you start when it comes to making change as a Black man, post-Trump, post-George Floyd, in the middle of a pandemic in 2021? Where do you all start when it comes to making change? What are the most important topics to you? And what are your first steps to impacting those changes? And I'll start with Coach P. Let's go with you first. Where do you start when it comes to making the changes you would like to see?
Well, I guess the first thing you start with is a little bit of focus and making sure you know what you're asking for. There's a lot of things that can emotionally affect you. You say, I want to do this, I want to change, but then you actually think it through, like, well, maybe I don't want that change, or the word, I guess, basically, you get a reaction or you get a result that you didn't plan for when you decide to make this specific change. So the first thing I would try to do is think about exactly what you want. I could bring up something like like a defund the police, statement. Now, I'm not for against defund the police, that statement in itself, and the reason why I say that is because it kind of depends on who you're asking. They actually define what that statement means. Defund the police. You have people say, "Well, we don't mean to take money from the police," and you have people say, "Well, yes, we do." And so it's hard to know what that statement is. But just an example, you could say, "Okay, we're out here trying to defund the police," and then you don't understand that. Okay, well, that means all these police officers that lived in your neighborhood, they got fired. And so now they don't have a job anymore. And so now you have less police officers in your neighborhood. And now the people who do a lot of crime in your neighborhood, they are a bit free to do that crime. And whether you agree with it or not, it's just knowing exactly what you're asking for. And then once you know exactly what you're asking for, then you just implement it every day. Whatever you kind of want, you just do it. It's the Obama, it's the Gandhi, be the change that you want to see. And so whatever change that you want to see, go out here and do it every day and for people to do it. And the louder your voice gets, the bigger your platform becomes, then it catches on automatically. It catches naturally. That's how I would do it.
Okay. So having a specific strategic focus and then being consistent in your follow through were the two major things I heard. Is that right?
It's basically, having a goal and set your mind to accomplish that goal. Work, if it's a small goal, it's a large goal, no matter what, but just start somewhere and accomplish that one and move on to the next
I love it. Nguvu, would you mind responding to the question next, please?
Yeah, not at all. So where I always start whenever I'm speaking to Black people specifically is the starting point is knowledge of self. You know what I'm saying? I personally believe that a big part of why Black people are living the way that we're living and have been living is because we don't know who we are as Africans. We don't know who we are. And to this day in 2021, we still carry the vestiges of slavery with our last names. Right. And so I feel like a people who don't know who they are can't really change their condition. We don't love who we are because we don't know who we are. And so whenever I'm talking to people about what they can do or where they need to start, that's always my starting point. Know who you are as an African. Secondly, I always say get involved with an organization or a cause. There are so many organizations doing so much good work that there's no excuse for anyone who claims that they want to be a part of the solution not to find an organization or cause to be a part of. As director of New Leaders Council Detroit, I don't get paid. It's a volunteer position. I have a team of volunteer leaders, and I'm always talking about what does it mean to volunteer your time? What is your relationship to volunteerism? I think a lot of times people like to talk about what the problems are, but they don't take the initiative to find out how they can get involved with being a part of the solution. And it's a really simple thing to do. All you got to do is Google whatever problem you have or whatever problem you see, Google that problem, and you'll find organizations that are working to address it. And so those are really the two focal points for me. An issue that I care about, I've transitioned. I'm always going to be an activist at heart, but obviously I've transitioned from activist work to political work, and the two are distinctly different. And one of the issues that really matters to me the most as a constituent and someone who's politically active is the issue of traffic in Detroit. And again, it goes back to Black life. If you look at what Brother Ferin is doing in Minneapolis, his activist work is, to protect Black life. And so I look at the issue of traffic in Detroit the same way, right? So we have some of the highest rates of vehicular homicide, automobile accidents. We have a very, and I know Coach P is going to co-sign on this one. We have people who just drive so recklessly in Detroit. No regard for the lives around them. We talk about Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter to Black people when we put each other in harm's way by blowing through stop signs, by blowing through red lights, by disregarding traffic laws, by doing, by being on the lodge with it and doing 90 miles an hour on the lodge. You know what I'm saying? when we talk about Black lives mattering, they got to matter to us first before they matter to anybody else. And a lot of times I think there's a disconnect between how people view Black Lives Matter through the activist prism and how people view Black Lives Matter through the political prism. And so when I'm looking at political issues, I'm always asking myself, how is this impacting Black life? And the issue that's really just been grinding my gears lately is just how reckless a lot of folks in our community have been driving. I wouldn't raise children in my neighborhood today because I couldn't send them across the street, across 7 Mile, being scared that they were going to get hit by a car because of how people in my neighborhood drive. And so, I always encourage people as we talk about Black Lives Mattering to think about how we value or devalue Black life through our own actions.
I deeply appreciate it. I believe that during one of our talks recently, Coach Parrish, you were just processing a change in your local neighborhood dealing with traffic, weren't you? And let me know if the audio is coming through okay. But it's just interesting that.
I can hear you barely.
What about now?
Barely.
All right, I think the signal is coming in and out. So do me a favor and log out and log back in. And I'll pivot to Ferin.
Hello.
There we are. Yes, we sure can. And again, we are in motion with two of our guests today, with Coach P and Ferin Kid, both being in the field right now. Can you hear us, Coach P? No worries. While we're waiting for the audio to connect, I'll pivot to you, Ferin. Where do you start when it comes to making changes at the local level in your community? I know local has always been your focus, and you're very good at implementing change, pulling folks from the bottom and the top to the table. So what does that look like for you when it comes to your process? And what changes specifically are important to you right now in the coming days?
Yeah, so definitely I would say you got to start with self, you can't change anyone else if you can't change self. So it's always first and foremost about self accountability. Secondly, home. If you want to change, you can't change a community until you're able to change a home. You can't maintain a community until you're able to maintain a home. And secondly, if we want to change, the world, then we have to think globally but act locally. So I think it's a tier system. A lot of times we have people who want to go out and who want to lead change, but they haven't led the changes necessary inside of their own self first. So they may be effective in certain areas, but you start to see kind of the mental and emotional health, or they're unable to sustain their movements in their organizations because they have stress factors at home that present obstacles to their movements for change. So inside of self, and all of those things are important. Knowledge of self, understanding, our historical narratives as Black people. We've adopted a lot of, ideas, a lot of behaviors, that, through history that were meant to do exactly what they're doing, and that's destroy us. So there's definitely a significant portion of change that comes from unlearning and relearning. For me, I do a lot of there's a lot of, we say in Black OC, nobody could do everything, but everybody could do something. And there's no one way to fight this war that we're in as Black people. But one of the most significant areas of change that I believe we need to focus on in order to see effective change is gang culture. We spend a lot of time and it's completely necessary. So I'm predicating the statement that I'm about to make on saying I'm not diminishing nor taking away from any other areas of fighting that we have to do to see change. But, we spend a lot of time, combating law enforcement, as we should. But the reality for many Black folks who are living in, destabilized communities that have been systemically attacked by white supremacy is that, we're killing ourselves more than they're killing us. And that's an unfortunate reality. So if we can combat the system and we can change the system, but if we don't change the culture of the community, we don't change the culture of gang and gun violence, then I don't think much is going to change. And that's kind of a reality that I found here in Minneapolis. I'm at the George Floyd Square now. You know, I want to respect the space, so I'm not over there while people are, you know, commemorating. But you know, even for this community, you know, they've had several shootings, you know, that are not police related. So I spend a lot of my energies connecting with the gang culture, and trying to, you know, transition them, help them understand the power that they exercise over the community and the culture, and help them, you know, utilize that power in a way that is constructive for us as opposed to destructive. It's a very difficult fight. It's a very challenging and dangerous fight, but I don't think that we can have a true and effective change if we're not also working on redeveloping that area.
I love it. So I've heard of
I agree
local
100%. Can you hear me
I've
again?
heard of local activism. Yes, we can. In
Okay.
the form of the things that impact you all directly. I think that's the resounding theme is paying attention to your surroundings and the things that bother you, taking action on them from whatever lens that looks like. It also
Yeah,
sounds
and
like you
if
is
there's
very
something if I could comment real
sure.
quick about what the gentleman before me said, it's like there's all kinds of ways we can do this. You know, there's one thing I got from I think Muhammad Ali did an interview, you know, back in like '70s, and he was comparing the struggle that we have to being in an actual war. And what he said was that if you're fighting a war, I think we were fighting Vietnam at the time. He was like, you don't just have the army and that's it. He said you got the army, you got the air force, you got the Delta Force people, you got the Navy. You try to attack these things on all these different levels. There's no one way to do this, but everybody's got to be on the same page that says this is where we're trying to go, though. But we got all these different people who are doing it their way. The Army doesn't know how to be the Navy. The Navy doesn't know how to be the Air Force, but they know how to do their job. And as long as everybody is doing something to just help and get us all down that same path, because that is the goal. All of us that are on this podcast right now, that's the goal. And so it's like, as long as you're doing it, it doesn't even matter how you're doing it. It's just as long as it's getting done. And that's how I feel. And I respect these two other gentlemen for doing it, you know, their way, you know.
Thank you for that, Coach B. Awesome and totally agree. I was going to pivot to a comment about next steps. There is a statistic that I'd like to go ahead and put to bed. Whenever we talk about gun violence or crime rates or things that involve loss of life, there's this black on black crime thing that comes up. So I want to go ahead and put that to bed on the podcast. Folks commit crime where they live. And because America still represents a largely segregated institution, we have to make sure that we are aware of the problem in a statistical sense. So both Black and white citizens experience a rate of around 80%, between 80 and 90% of homicides that are committed by their own people. Black people being between 12 and 14%, depending on what census you look at, and white folks still remaining just over 50%, depending on how you want to define Latinx, which is now segregated as a separate question on our census dealing with ethnicity. So the question that I want to ask you three is, when it comes to the way that Black men relate to one another, there is a statistic that tends to be a bit alarming on the violence side within our community. 89% of violent crimes are committed by men. This is not a Black statistic. This is a general gender statistic. 89% of violence is committed by men at this point. What can we do to impact that conversation? How do we approach that conversation?
I don't go ahead.
I'm not really sure if I was. Go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's tough to know exactly how to combat that, because you know that statistic being true, I guess you got to ask, how long has it been true? Has it been true since the beginning of time? Have men just always been violent? And if you know if that is the case, you know I don't know how to combat that situation, because that wouldn't be culture, that wouldn't be America, that would be some sort of gender situation where it's like You know, men are just built. You know, we have that testosterone in us, and there's just something that comes out if we, you know, get tested or pushed to that limit. Now, I'm not sure how to combat that if that's the case. But if it is just simply society in our community, we gotta have, I think, two-parent households do a better job of making sure things don't turn violent. You know, when people are encountered with, you know, any kind of, you know, confrontation in the public area or anywhere. You know, two-parent households, when you're raised with that, you learn how to calm down a little bit because your parents, they let you know that if you're gonna fight, fight me, and I'll whoop your ass. And then you just say, okay, I understand. Let me just relax a little bit. So that's what I would say.
Okay, starting with parenting and modeling healthy habits, modeling nonviolent behavior. I love that. And Nguvu, you were going to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, I was just going to address it specifically as it pertains to Black men. You know, that's kind of like what I care about.
For sure.
um, but but you know, I think a huge part of it, and to Coach P's point, I do think that you know male aggression is just something that has been a thing for a very very long time. I think it's a part of our nature to be aggressive. Um, Generally speaking, obviously not all men are. You know, some men are more aggressive than others. Um, but I think a big part of the problem in the Black community, and specifically among Black men, is that we're not really allowed to show love to one another. We're not allowed to hug each other, to hold each other, to be intimate with each other because of this toxic masculinity that has been curated over decades, really centuries. And so, as a same gender loving Black man who loves my people and has been in um, Black nationalist and Pan African organizations my whole life, it's been very difficult to connect with a certain segment of the Black male community because of certain ideologies around my sexuality and sexual preferences. And so, I think that you know. If we, especially from my line of work as an activist, you know, our motto was always race first, Black first. And so we have to genuinely believe that. We have to genuinely believe you're Black first. No matter who you are, if you're down for our people, then we're down with you. It's unity. And I think if we had a greater sense of unity, you would see a lot of the violence in our community go down. But there are a lot of entities that profit off of our lack of unity. Think about all of the businesses that profit from Black people killing Black people. Think about all of the stakeholders who have stocks in those businesses and markets that benefit from us killing each other. And so I think a big part of a solution to dramatically decreasing the amount of violent crime in our communities is for those of us who are not violent to have a radical love for not only each other, and I'm emphasis on radical love um, for not only each other, but for those who are violent in our community.
I love that. Ferin, what say you?
Yeah, so yeah, I agree with all of those things. I always say, you know, in communities that were destroyed, we gave birth to a culture of destruction. There's definitely something to say for, you know, a genetic tendency of men to be more aggressive. Men are built as the more physically stronger of the sexes, and there's definitely a natural occurring element to that. But I think for Black people, especially you know African American people or Africans in America, it's not a genetic propensity to be violent as much as it is a cultural. So I think we have to depopularize violence. I think that we've created a culture that's popularized violence and being quick to violence. You know, 0 to 100 real quick. You know, and we have to denormalize violence. You know, it's become way too acceptable um, and associated with being cool. You know, I grew up where it was cool. Like if you was going, you know, I grew up and thought that it was a rite of passage to engage in criminal acts, to frankly, shoot another black man. That was considered as, a rite of passage into manhood. To go to jail, a rite of passage into manhood, to hit a lick, to take advantage of women, whether it was sexually, emotionally and mentally, financially. That I grew up in a culture, um, that said that these things were okay. So a lot of the work that I do is not only resisting these ideas, or not only trying to be a better reflection, but also in a militaristic way, even a confrontational way, in many respects challenging these ideas. If you quick to run and get a gun and shoot another black man, um, I would say that's bitch nigga shit. That's a cowardly act. If you're not willing to fight a man over what you want to kill him for, then you have no right to fight that man. You know, um, so I think a lot of it is just gonna have to be making violence uncool. Making self-hate and community destruction uncool. Same thing. We claim these neighborhoods. We definitely have a stake in these neighborhoods, but this can't be your hood, homie. If you don't have no ownership, you don't have no equity in your neighborhood. This can't be your hood. And not only that, many of these, we killing over signs, street signs that got white man's last name on it instead of mine. So I think that we have to actively depopularize and actively denormalize our quickness to violence. And I think when we do that, there's going to be a very visceral reaction from our brothers who are still very much their identity is attached to being quick to violence, especially through gang culture and all kinds of other warped ideologies. But if we can get to a place where we're making self-love, you know be cool, and self-love becomes something normal to see with the youth that are growing up, then I think we'll start achieving more peaceful communities and cultures.
Yeah, to follow
I
up on
love
that,
that.
I have a question. I'm sorry, Kyra. I don't want to take over your show, but I do have a question.
I want you to
Um,
speak. Go ahead, Coach.
no, do you think that I will never say all of hip hop because there's too many Talib Kweli's, there's too many common senses out here, J. Cole's to say all of hip hop. But do you think that certain elements, certain types of hip hop that we grew up on has really hurt us in a way that I guess we simply didn't anticipate? I guess that would be my question to all three of you.
I'll weigh in firstly, if I may. Absolutely. That's in Black OC. We begin in our mission statement by saying a creative movement that utilizes the power of hip hop to build community, and in that statement is a direct correlation with what you're saying. Hip hop is, to me, the greatest influence on the culture of today's society, and it was definitely a significant influence on me. I can directly attribute much of my criminal and violent behavior to the influences of hip hop. Growing up in a community that was either predominantly white and very well off, or predominantly brown and struggling with a lot of the same obstacles that black communities are struggling with. Um, and not having access to a lot of black men. I definitely had access to a lot of black youth, and many of them were growing up in a very similar situation to me. They were growing up without their fathers in their household. We look to the hip hop artists, and we held on to their words as if they were God. That was our Bible. So in many ways, hip hop cultivated in me a mentality that was self and socially destructive. But then on the flip side, the Talib Kweli's, the Mos Def, the Rakims, the Woos, even artists who have fell on both sides of the equation, from the Tupacs, and the Biggies. It also had a significant influence on how I reshaped myself to this day. I think that hip hop is almost literally the answer. And if we can get to a place where we can have a constructive criticism of hip hop, and we begin to understand that we have a responsibility. Hip hop artists are influencers. They are modern day leaders. Their messages and their demonstrations are influencing the behavior of our youth and our culture by and large. They can go a very long way. I would say maybe even 50% of the way in actually reshaping and making a more peaceful culture.
Thank you, Ferin, and thank you, Coach P, for that question. Nguvu, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree that a lot of the music is harmful that a lot of our people are listening to, including myself. I'm always take ownership of my problematic traits because I like some of that trash music. But I would say I think the music is really a reflection of people's lived experiences, and people are just monetizing their lived experiences, which I have no problem with. My mission in life is to change those lived realities of our people. And that's why I do the work that I'm doing now. I started in activism. I've transitioned to politics. Who knows, I might go back to activism one day. But I work every single day to have the ear of the people who are controlling the policies that dictate people's lived experiences. And if we can change people's lived experiences, we'll change hip hop because we'll change the content. And so if people aren't experiencing all of these crazy things that we hear about in this music, they won't write about it. they won't have it to write about. And so I think that's why, it's so vitally important, like Coach P said, that everybody is doing their part, wherever that part is. We have people working with the youth. We have people working to, address gang culture. We have people working to shape policy that's beneficial to Black life, and so I don't really harp too much on hip hop music because I look at hip hop as the symptom and not the root cause of the problem.
Can I add one thing to that? Definitely agree. And there's a saying, art imitates life, and then at some point, life begins to imitate the art. So I think that, as you said, hip hop, the sometimes or oftentimes negative nature of hip hop music is just a reflection of a reality. If we change the reality, then we'll change the art. But I do think that at this point in time, there's an acknowledgement that the art is perpetuating the reality, and becoming a hindrance to changing that reality. Because a lot of people, certain policies can get changed, but a lot of times the youth still feel that they're caught up in a culture, they're caught up in a lifestyle that was birthed from the policies that govern their communities, but now can arguably be said, in many respects, to kind of be self-imposed, But in any case, I definitely agree 100% that, in many respects, it's just change the reality. We change the art.
And I'll provide an
agree.
answer. I was asked, Coach B. I will go ahead and respond to your questions as well, since you asked all three of us. And I think that there's one piece that I do want to highlight in the answer that I have for this question, which is that I think we're meant to be offended by the realities that the art represents. And I think that it is our responsibility to be so offended that we reach out to those expressing self and find out what part of the reality makes us uncomfortable and be that change. We did a study. If you look at some of the most affluent hip hop artists today, there's a common thread. None of them became pregnant in high school. And I mean that for male or female. No one had a child in high school. When we're talking about Beyonce, Jay-Z, Megan Thee Stallion, your Cardi B's, all of these different hip hop artists that we may or may not listen to while riding in the car with mom. And I'm not going to call it trash art. I'm going to call it real art because it came from a real person. And it's fire art. It's offensive on purpose because the reality behind it is something we know happened. We realize that men and women really feel this way, and they really celebrate these parts of our culture, and we're embarrassed about it. And that's the reality that I would like us to take on. I don't want us to shun them when they're a reflection of us. And I think that's the danger in the narrative. So my answer would be being brave enough to be honest about why we're offended by the music. The fact that we recognize this is a real mentality, it's not something they're making up. And then start highlighting the parts of the artist's life, because these are successful young people, most of them in their 20s. Literally, most of these people are in their 20s. And when we were in our 20s, I'm very sure that a lot of our decision making didn't make all the sense in the world either. So giving a bit of grace to that part of the conversation. But since they're living their life on Netflix and on YouTube and on social media for us to dissect, I think it's important for us as the new leaders of our generation to start being vocal about why these folks are having success. Because there's parts of their choices that are not being broadcast to me that are important for us to highlight, like sexual responsibility, financial responsibility, the business moves they're making. None of these people have bad credit at this point. So they can be used in a case study to educate others on how to become successful as Black people if we put their success in the right context and stop focusing on the very easy and low-hanging fruit of tearing down another Black person. I think there's a lot of power there.
And I also
with that,
go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think with that, it's fascinating to follow the artist sometimes. Like you could listen to Jay-Z's early stuff and you hear a lot of things that he's talking about, but as he gets older, when his credit does get better, when he's not doing the things that he used to do, that's why it's so important to follow these artists as they grow up. It's really scary and dangerous to have one-hit wonders that come out with this fire song that everybody picks up, but then you don't actually go through everything that this artist did, because the artist made it when they were 20, and so now they're 30 or 40 years old. You got a completely different person, and that's how you get what you're talking about. And I think all three examples of what you guys are talking about, I think is great. I think it's perfect.
And Nguvu, you were getting ready to speak.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, a lot of these artists. So if I ever run for office and win public office, I will probably be the most pro Cardi B politician in America. I know the lyric to every single Cardi B song she has ever put out. And one of the reasons why I love her so much is because she don't give a fuck. And that's what I love about her generation. That's what I love about Generation Z. You know what I'm saying? She's an Afro-Latina woman who just doesn't give a fuck. And women are not allowed to not give a fuck. And so, I think what a lot of these artists are doing are twofold. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, one, dismantling white supremacy through not giving a fuck. One. And two, I feel like there is a movement amongst a lot of our celebrities as of late to pour back into their communities. Like even these brothers who put out a lot of problematic, what some of us would call problematic music. The money that they're making, they're feeding people back in their communities. They're taking that back and buying community centers or investing in community centers or investing in sports leagues. Like I feel like this generation of superstars is doing more in giving back than superstars of previous generations. Like there's just this consciousness that you see permeating a lot of our musicians, even those who sometimes make problematic music. So I just think the whole conversation is nuanced. And I just wanted to add that to it.
I love it. Ferin, did you want to weigh in?
No, we covered it all.
Very good. So I'd like to pivot to this last question for this group, because this has been a fire conversation here on the ReImagine Liberty podcast. We are sitting here with Coach P of Detroit, Michigan, and Nguvu Tsare of Detroit, Michigan, and Ferin Kidd of Blvck Womxn, Orange County, California. And I really appreciate you all. This has been amazing. I want to pivot back to a statement made a few moments ago by Ferin Kidd in talking about some of the things that are popularized in a bundle, in a package. So there is the lack of identity of self of Africans in America. There is the perception of what a rite of passage looks like for some of our Black men. And depending on where you're from, that list can look different. But there are understood rites of passage from becoming a youth to becoming a full-grown adult. The last one that I'd like to touch on is the relationship between Black men and Black women. As the founder of Blvck Womxn Worldwide, all of my conversations will at some point touch on the relationship inside of our community between those two groups. I'll leave this as an open-ended question that anyone can start with. What can we do to bring Black men and Black women to a healthy table to work together? Because we know that's not happening in the way that it should yet.
Is the question beginning with myself, or
Sure.
was it?
Absolutely. Go first, Ferin.
Um, so for me, I think one of the strongest, for me personally, and the dimension of Black culture that I grew up in, or the space that I was raised in. I think we had a very negative perception of women. It could be best be, described through the phrase "bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks." And growing up, that was kind of the idea. Women were somehow, inferior to men. I think that comes from a general sense of misogyny that permeates this culture, and I think that the white supremacist ideology influence filters in how many times as Black men we look at Black women, especially. Um, with some of the same kind of self-hatred that we look at ourselves with. Black men can kind of, even as a Black man, look and have a prejudice, have a narrative already constructed in my perception about who you are or who you may be. And the revolutionary perspective is to say, like the brother said, to have a radical love, to say, I don't know who you. I'm going to combat my prejudice before I get to know you. I'm going to assume I know you as my brother, and we're going to start that you're Black first, and so therefore there's a love there. Um, I think I think one of the first and foremost things we can do is just address the language. I think we refer to women as bitches, and if we can, and I won't say that there's not a context. There's often, a argument to be made, even oftentimes by women themselves, Black women themselves. But I think if we can get to a space where we begin, you know, emphasizing that women are not bitches, Black women are valuable, are the most valuable creature to the Black community, um, and we have a responsibility and a duty to love them unconditionally. So when I see Black women, I change my language from bitch, how we used to refer to sister. Just that action of saying I'm going to subtract one word and I'm going to add another one, and in adding that word sister, it changes the way that I would relate to a Black woman. Um, and I think just the encouragement of that becomes a radical act that a lot of Black youth that I mentor are sometimes not comfortable with. In their language, they're very comfortable in referring to women in general and Black women especially, in a language that's destructive. And when you say, brother, that's not a bitch, that's a sister. I think sometimes that's to them kind of like, well, how is it my sister? She's not. That might feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's a radical expression of love. But just that action changes their perception and changes the way that they react, appreciate, and respect and love. And I think that can go a long way, among many other things, in changing the relationship dynamic between Black men and Black women, especially in the culture that I deal with, which is largely, gang and criminal culture.
Yeah,
Thank you,
if I
Ferin.
could if I could piggyback right on that, both the term radical love, that's exactly where I would start it, and I feel like in order to get that radical love, you got to get that radical respect too, and you just got to see people as individuals, as people, whether you know them or not. You just know I'm gonna respect this individual, whether the male, female, and it starts there. And once you have a general, just radical, respect in whoever you meet, and just treat them respectfully, whether it's men, women, older people, younger people, doesn't matter. Just have the respect for who you're talking to, and treat them, you know, like the Bible says, treat them like you want to be treated. It's really that simple. And the only reason it's hard is because of a lot of the influences that we get, from external places. But if you just, do your everyday and treat every person you meet, men, women, as just somebody you should respect no matter what, I think you can get everything that we want, especially between the sexes of black men and black women.
Thank you, Coach B. Nguvu?
Dope. I love both of those answers. And I would just add, well, first, shameless plug. I'm proud to work for an amazing, brilliant, and beautiful Black woman named Janae Ayers. So for all of your Detroit watchers and listeners, go to janaeayers.com and learn more about what the councilwoman has done and wants to do for another 4 years. I'm honored to be working for a Black woman. And then I think it's important to make space. We don't have enough time for a conversation, but I want to, while I have this platform and have this moment, to make space for Black trans women who are also an important and necessary and needed and valuable part of our community, and many of whom I'm blessed to have relationships and friendships with. And to your point of Black men and women, I'm going to assume that was about cis men and cis women. I would say the two things I would say on that are, I'll start with Black men. I think that we need to let go of this spirit of fear that we have to be our full, authentic selves. And I also think that Black women need to be better at giving us those spaces to be our full, authentic selves as men. I think a lot of times, whether it's your Black mother or your Black grandmother or your Black aunties or your Black sisters or just Black women in the community, because our condition is so dire as a people in this nation and in this world, I think that there are different pressures that are put on Black women and Black men, and the pressures that are put on Black men contribute to that culture of toxic masculinity that I brought up before. Whether it's allowing Black men to be their full sexual selves, whether it's allowing Black men to just be emotional, whether it's a lot of times we as men feel like we can't be emotional because we're going to be called a punk or we're going to be called a bitch by the women that say they want us to be their rocks. But a lot of times we're not able to be that rock because we're not allowed to do our self-work. It's this weird back and forth that I just noticed that goes on between Black mothers and Black sons and Black women and Black men who are in romantic relationships. And so I think Black men need to take self-responsibility and quit making excuses for why we refuse to be our full, authentic selves as humans. But I also think that Black women could help us along the way by curating those spaces when you're raising us or when you're in relationships with us to give us the opportunity to be our full, authentic self without feeling like our manhood is going to be questioned.
And I love that answer. Just to clarify, no, I did not mean cis. I am inclusive of both trans and cis, and I love that you love that language. We actually just had a conversation 2 podcasts ago about the dire straits of our Black trans sisters. Average life expectancy still at 35 years old, which is completely unacceptable. So thank you for opening that dialogue. We will definitely have you back on the show to explore that part of the family. Love that. But I just want to thank you all so much. 1, for your time this morning. 2, for sharing space with me and with each other. This has been powerful. And 3, I can say that based on all of these comments, things that I will be taking back to my sisters are the challenges that you guys have given us, because this is a 2-way dialogue, right? And there's work to do on both sides. I would encourage you all lovingly, if a Black woman is not giving you space to express, if we are being toxic, lovingly remind us that we have a responsibility in this too. Because the last thing that we want is a damaged brother that we're working in partnership from any relationship, whether it's romantic, financial, building, community, whatever that looks like. Remind us that we have a stake in this also. We're trying to do our best also. We will continue to hold space for you all here in Black Women Worldwide. But I would like to thank Ferin Kid for taking time out on your journey as you are in motion, for spending time with me and with us today. Nguvu, thank you so much for being so vulnerable, authentic, responsible, wise. Love the energy. And I thank you so much for championing Congresswoman Ayers in your work and also the NLC in your directorship. So all of the respect, power, love to you in that space. Coach P, for your mentorship of these young men, for your commitment to the city of Detroit in service of the people, and also for your ideas. For those of you that are able, please check out Coach P's interview with Mayor Duggan when he was speaking on changes that are necessary in the city of Detroit. Fox 2 did give a bit of a clip that cut some of the remaining points. But I'd like to end on that note, Coach P. You were just recently in an interview where you were asked what next steps for City of Detroit look like. And we know the power of media in presenting the part of the soundbite that serves the agenda. So I would like to end on that note. What did you want to see as next steps for City of Detroit in its entirety?
Well, I was it wasn't really an interview, but it was more like we had the chance to call in and ask the mayor what we want to do with the $426 million that's out here. And the mayor laid out 6 or 7 points about what he thought should happen. And I chimed in with what I thought was missing from his agenda. And although I agreed with everything that he had on his agenda, the one thing I thought was missing was a marketing campaign for the city. And what I meant by that was we need to rebuild the Detroit Pride, label right now. I think we have a lot of people who support the city. They support their area. They support, like my man said earlier, they support their street signs, but they don't support the city. They don't say, well, and I don't even want to say they. I want to say we. We don't support our city as much as we should. We can rep it. Right now, we got the sweatshirt on, I'm from Detroit. But how many times do we drive around and see people throwing trash out their window like they just don't care? And we all see it. And it's not just Detroit. There's all kinds of things, because at the end of the day, when you're throwing that trash out your window, you're not just throwing it, and somebody's going to pick it up. You're destroying your own city. You're destroying your own community, your own block. And that's the part that I thought was important as far as the pride you got to start feeling. Because as Detroit citizens, when we talk about ownership of something, if you live in the city, guess what? You own something here. You are part. If you pay taxes here, this is your city. And you have to start acting and treating it like it's yours. And you don't just destroy your own city just because you feel like it. That is a mentality that has to be changed, because we didn't grow up in that. We grew up in Detroit is this whole other thing that, somebody else is taking care of. And I just got my people over here. This is my family. This is my crew. These are my blocks over here that we got. But when you got to start actually understanding that it's your city, especially a city like Detroit, which is 85% Black. It's just, we want to keep this our city. And if people want to come in and join, great. Be a part of it. We don't want nobody out. We want to keep it the way it is, with the people that are already here. And if you want to come on and join and come over here and be on board with what we're talking about, bring all in. But the thing about what Fox 2 did is they just showed this one little clip. They just said my answer was, I don't even remember what they said. Police safety.
Public safety.
Public safety. And that's all they said. And I feel like because it's Fox, that could be meant to be, okay, he just went to a police on the street and that's it. And it's like, yeah, that's not really what I was saying. It was more like, of the things that he said, I would choose public safety because my option wasn't available. The $426 million can't be used for a marketing campaign. And he said the mayor of Los Angeles actually asked the same question. Can we use this money to build a marketing campaign for the city? And the Biden administration said no. And if that's the rule, that's the rule. I'm not mad about that, but there has to be another way to do these things. And, that's why I want, if I'm going to live here, if we're going to live here, my man's in California, but if we're going to live in these neighborhoods, we got to start treating it like it's ours. And we're the ones that's going to change it at the end of the day.
Agreed. So I'd like to close on this note. Each of you all is taking up space in a way that I find vital, that I am honored to stand in concert with, and I fully support. So from Coach B's example, I would like us to take away the fact that you can speak truth to power anytime you feel like it. You can call your mayor and let them know that in the options that they gave you, they didn't cover what you cared about. And that might end up on Fox News because of the dedication to your city that you are just in the habit of having. And as a citizen, you have that ownership. Ferin, you have a documentary that is currently circling the United States at this moment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so immediately following the murder of George Floyd, um, upon seeing that video, I felt like most people, and that's like I had to do something. And I know oftentimes we don't know what it is we could do. Sometimes it's just bringing your body out to show support. Sometimes it's speaking up. In this case, for me, I'm from California, but seeing that video, I felt a great, call in my spirit to bring my body to Minneapolis, to raise my voice with Minneapolis, and also to come as a representative of my respective region for those who may have felt the same way, but who don't have the flexibility and their obligations to be able to travel, to stand with the people of Minneapolis against the injustice, which was the murder of George Floyd. Alongside that, I use my camera like my tool. I use it to, amplify Black voices and leaders who are trying to make our communities and our cultures better places. So I brought my camera with me, and as we know, the media doesn't always accurately portray our narratives, as we're discussing right now. I wanted to utilize my camera to capture what was happening at a ground level, and in doing that, I captured a very compelling story, which I'm proud to say follows the lead of a Black sister who is courageous and who is articulate, and who put down a demonstration, and a variety of conversations that the world needs to see. All that footage that I captured at that time was compiled into a full-length 45-minute guerrilla-style cinematic documentary. It's gaining a lot of popularity in California. We did our first movie theater screening in Santa Ana just a few, maybe not even 2 weeks ago. In attendance, we had some very iconic Black historical figures, including Laura King, the daughter of Rodney King. Um, they made headlines in local newspaper. We had a very powerful brother, a celebrity brother. You may be familiar with his music, even if you may not be familiar with himself as an artist, named Aloe Black. And now we're back in Minneapolis, reconnecting with the people here, bringing the film that many of this people of this community are a part of. And we want to take it on tour all across the nation. We believe in its artistry. We believe in its messages, and we want to build a grassroots level campaign for it before we bring it to a larger streaming platform like a Hulu or a Netflix. And as well, we're seeking to partner with the George Floyd family and the George Floyd Memorial Foundation to provide them equity in the film so that it can continue to fund the social justice work that they're going to do in honor of George Floyd, as well as partner with a grassroots organization who is fighting for the preservation of the George Floyd Memorial Square in a very, guerrilla style fashion, called Agape. We seek to partner with them and also give them equity in the film to help fund the work that they're doing, and get them empowered. And lastly, we're developing a curriculum behind this film, which we hope to get into colleges and universities all across the nation, so that way students can reflect on what happened, both the good and the bad, and learn from it, because we know that this is not a moment, it's a movement, and it's really just a matter of time before we find ourselves confronted with the same situation, and hopefully we can, while the nation will grieve, while the nation will rage, hopefully we can leverage those moments to gain more power for our communities and our cultures.
I love that. And we will be showing a viewing of Ferin Kids documentary on George Floyd and his community during Black Women's Day on June 18th and Black Freedom Weekend, June 18th through June 20th. And Nguvu will be one of our speakers on the day dedicated to men, which will be that Sunday. And we invite you, Coach P, to participate as well if you are available in building that Black power, Black equity, and that community conversation.
We'll see. We'll see if I'm available.
Always in motion. So I appreciate you all very, very much. Thank you so much for your time. This does conclude this week's edition of Reimagine Liberty, the podcast. And we will see you all same time, same space next week. Thank you to everyone that dropped in comments and decided to participate live. We appreciate you. And be good. Be well. We'll see you next week at the same space. Take care now.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, brothers.